Capital Gazette shooting victims. The 5 killed in attack on Maryland newspaper Fishman was an award-winning writer and editor at the Capital who had worked for the paper for more than a quarter century. The Baltimore Sun, which owns the Annapolis-based Capital, says colleagues noted Fishman's quiet personality, which masked a keen mind that produced editorials ranging from state politics to arts reviews. He had ability that, I thought, deserved a higher calling than the Capital, longtime editor and publisher Tom Marquardt acknowledged to The Sun. He was a great writer. He was a really smart guy, so smart that he tried out for Jeopardy twice, Marquardt said, according to newspaper. But he couldn't get accepted because they didn't like his personality. That was Gerald's spin, anyway. Shanti Felix, a former reporter at Capital Gazette Communications, posted on her Facebook page that he was shy and quiet, but a thorough editor who was filled with a wealth of knowledge. He was also a very sweet man. Married to a Mongolian opera singer, Fishman graduated from the journalism school at the University of Maryland in 1979, according to the Associated Press. Hyacinth shared the sardonic wit of his famous brother, author Carl Hyacinth. Rob's wryly observant writing style and his generous mentoring of young journalists assured him of roles in several newsrooms, from the Baltimore Sun to, most recently, the Capital Gazette in Annapolis. The Sun's Jean Marbella writes. Hyacinth joined the Capital in 2010 as assistant editor, after working as a reporter at the Baltimore Sun for 15 years, according to the AP. The news agency says that prior to that, he had been a staff reporter at the Palm Beach Post and news anchor and reporter for radio stations across the South. In a post on Facebook, Carl Hyacinth wrote that he was devastated and heartsick to confirm the loss of my wonderful brother Rob today. A man, he said, was one of the most gentle and funny people I've ever known. He spent his whole gifted career as a journalist, and he believed profoundly in the craft and mission of serving the public's right to know the news. According to The Sun, he and his wife Maria, with whom he had 3 children, had celebrated their 33rd anniversary just days before he was killed. John McNamara, 56, staff writer and editor for the Bowie Glade News and the Crofton West County Gazette. McNamara, who went by Mac, loved covering sports and wrote extensively on the subject, according to the AP. He could write. He could edit. He could design pages. He was just a jack of all trades and a fantastic person, Capital Gazette sports editor Jerry Jackson told The Sun. According to the newspaper, the University of Maryland graduate wrote 2 books about athletics at his alma mater. The University of Maryland Football Vault, The History of the Terrapins, tracked Maryland football from its first game in 1892 through the 2008 season. Cole Classics. Maryland basketball's leading men in moments told the story of Terrapin basketball. He was working on a book about great basketball players raised in the Washington area when he died, Baltimore Sun reporter Jeff Barker said. The AP says he was married and loved local history, rock and folk music. Smith had only joined the Capital Gazette in November, according to her Facebook page. She was a very thoughtful person, the Capital Gazette's advertising director, Marty Patton, was quoted by The Sun as saying. She was kind and considerate, and willing to help when needed. She seemed to really enjoy working in the media business. On Facebook, Smith wrote about her battle against endometriosis, a condition creating abnormal tissue growth outside the uterine wall, calling herself an endo warrior. She also described herself as a dog mom. Softball fiancé. Bonus mom to the best kid ever. The AP says she was a Baltimore native and lived with her fiancé in East Baltimore County. According to the Baltimore Sun, Winters came to journalism later in life after a career in fashion and public relations in New York, starting as a freelancer for the Capital Gazette 20 years ago. A former community news editor at the newspaper group, Leslie Hunt, said Winters was dedicated and loved the work. She loves the news business, Hunt said. According to the newspaper, Winters covered all sorts of local news at the Capital Gazette, Hunt said, and wrote columns for the Home of the Week, Teen of the Week, and around Broadneck features. She joined the staff full-time in May 2013 after more than a decade writing articles for Hire. The Sun writes, beyond the newsroom, she identified herself as a proud Navy mom, a church youth advisor, a Red Cross volunteer and a Girl Scout leader who could make a mean s'more. On her Facebook page, Winters described herself as having Peter Pan DNA, blended with some extroverted introversion, sprinkled with proper punctuation marks and served half-baked with a Manhattan attitude. Painter, muralist and author Michael Bell, writing on Winters' page, said, Wendy covered my career in art and education over the past decade and championed the community in countless ways, adding that she always got the story right, and as someone my wife and I always considered a friend. The Capital Gazette in Annapolis, Maryland, published a newspaper the day after its newsroom was ripped apart by gunfire. "Yes, we're putting out a damn paper tomorrow," the paper tweeted just after midnight Thursday, fulfilling a promise made by a Resolute reporter earlier in the day. Reporter Chase Cook had vowed a damn paper just hours after the shooting at the Capitol, a paper that is the lifeblood of the waterside community of Annapolis. Cook, who said he was not in the building during the carnage that left 5 people dead, said a colleague, crime reporter Phil Davis, was, and heard the chilling sounds of the shooter reloading. Staffers dived under desks as bullets pierced through a glass door, Davis told the Baltimore Sun, the Capitol's parent company. "There is nothing more terrifying than hearing multiple people get shot while you're under your desk, and then hear the gunman reload," he said. Staff writer Celine Sanfelice, who also took cover under a desk during the rampage, told CNN in a powerful interview that it was hard to fathom how a normal workday turned into one in which she watched colleagues die and was recounting the horror on national TV hours later. Felice, who said she had covered the Pulse shooting in Orlando, said she was shattered. "I'm going to need more than a couple days of news coverage and some thoughts and prayers," she told CNN. For journalists used to covering the news, it seemed a surreal twist of fate as police and emergency responders swarmed their building. Joshua McCarrow, a photojournalist who had covered induction day at the Naval Academy at sunrise Thursday, told The Sun he was heading home for his daughter's birthday when he was shaken by a phone call from editor Rick Hutzel. He said he'd heard there had been a shooting and he couldn't get in touch with anyone in the newsroom, McCarrow said. "When sirens echoed, my heart sank and I knew," he told the Sunday Nun. Devastated and heartbroken were the anguished words from editor Jimmy Debitz, who lauded the daily determination of the staff's reporters and editors. "There are number 40-hour weeks, no big paydays, just a passion for telling stories from our community," he tweeted. The Capital Gazette offices has 2 newspapers, one of which is the oldest in the country. The Maryland Gazette was founded by a British journalist in 1727. The Capital was founded in Annapolis in 1884 by a former judge of the Anne Arundel County Orphans Court. Debit spoke to the core of the newsroom's mission, telling the stories of the people of Annapolis. We are there in times of tragedy. We do our best to share the stories of people, those who make our community better. Please understand, we do all this to serve our community, he said. Annapolis Mayor Gavin Buckley saluted the staff, who are well known in the community. This thing for us is very personal, because the journalists who work there, a lot of them are friends of ours, he said. It's a thankless job and they don't make a lot of money. It's not like the publication is some right-wing or left-wing thing. It's a publication that reports good local news, from stories on local sports teams to cats stuck up a tree, he said. I hope this is not an attack on journalism. McCarrow also struck a defiant note that despite the bloodshed, the newsroom would not be deterred. There will be a Capital Friday, he tweeted.